So great. Thank you for coming, Charlotte, from More Onion. And please go ahead with your presentation on copywriting for fundraisers.
Brilliant. All right. Hi, everyone. I can see a few of you. Thank you for inviting me along today. It's really great to be here. I'm, as Alex was saying, I'm Charlotte. I'm a mobiliser at More Onion. So bit of my history previously, I have been a campaigner. I've campaigned with both the Wildlife Trusts and the Woodland Trusts, as well as working with Headway, the Brain Injury Association. But I actually got my start in my career in local journalism. So the point of showing you that sort of a patchwork of a career is to say that throughout my career, I've been writing really compelling copy for like a variety of different objectives and audiences, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to be giving you a bit of a taster of our More Onion's like full copywriting training that we deliver. And I'm going to be sharing some like top tips on writing great emails for your supporters. Before we get into the session, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about More Onion, just so you sort of know who you're hearing from, but I won't bore you for too long, don't worry. So here we go. Oh. Okay. So basically, we're digital mobilisation experts. So we only exclusively work with non-profits, and we work to deliver like high impact digital campaigns and fundraising as well. We're really passionate about like learning and experimenting and optimizing things so that we can really drive innovation and good practice in the sector, keep things moving and always improving. We work with organisations across the UK, across Europe, whether it's really small like local charities, you've got one part-time, maybe paid member of staff, to the big multinational corporations like Oxfam International, that kind of thing. So wherever you're coming from, like we get it, and we have experience working with charities of size. So we're a team of experts across 3 fields, and we're based across the UK, Germany, and Austria. Our head office is in Vienna. I see some of my lovely colleagues in the photos. So the 3 kind of key areas are strategy, creative, and tech. So as well as the consultancy side of things, we're also the creators of Impact Stack, which is the digital platform that you can use for campaigning and fundraising. So basically, as part of our work, it's a big part of my work, we deliver a lot of trainings. Those can be like public trainings that anyone can pay to come along to, or they might be in-house trainings for a specific organisation. We recently delivered a copywriting training with Alex at St Mungo's, and we're so delighted that they got so much out of it, and that Alex really kindly asked us to come along today. Thank you. It sounds like lots of people have come along, and we're looking forward to it. So I hope you enjoy it. Obviously, I cannot deliver what would usually be like an 8-hour over 2-day training in 40 minutes. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at some top tips for writing great supporter emails for the purpose of the fundraising and for your donors to do. And then we're going to do just a couple of exercises to try and help you put some of that into practice right away and be thinking about it and applying it to your work. So we're going to talk about emails. Emails is often one of the most important but like quite unforgiving channels. But if you kind of get it right with your emails, you're often going to get it right everywhere else. So just a little disclaimer today, I'm going to use the phrase supporter, but in the context of this presentation, it's in the broadest sense. I'm talking about anyone who's involved in your work or that you would be applying it to. And although we're kind of talking about email, the tips here are also very broadly applicable to a lot of other channels. And we'll be talking about channels a little bit as well. So most of the tips here focus on email. So before I launch into telling you all this stuff, presenting to you, I just want to start with you guys by asking you a couple of questions so you can then be thinking about it, have it in your minds while we go through the rest of the chat today. So I'm going to ask you to answer a couple of poll questions about your current supporter content. So I'm going to launch the poll now. Can everybody see some poll questions? Great, fabulous. So I just want you to have a bit of a think about these. There is no right or wrong answer. I'm not collecting this information. It's basically just to get you to have a think about your experiences and your current role so that you can have that fresh in your mind as you go into the chat today. So just have a little bit think about your current supported emails. Which of these kind of would you say applies most to? I appreciate you've probably got various different email lists or different things you're doing. Just generally, which one would you say applies most, just so you've got it in your head? And then the second one, which has appeared at the same time, which is also about how confident are you that you know sort of what makes that in support of engaging supported content, writing that content, whether or not it's your job to write it. So very confident, fairly confident, or not so confident, or it's just completely new to you and you've never done it before. You have a moment to think about it. I'd say that's probably pretty much everyone who's had a chance to put that there. But just if anyone's finishing off, I could see there's a bit of a mix in terms of those support emails that you're currently sending out. So that's interesting, and we'll come onto that a bit in the presentation today. Also, really good to see that so many of you are already pretty confident when it comes to knowing what goes into those emails. So I hope that you will still find some either new bits or some reassurance in terms of what I'm talking about today about being on the right track. For those of you saying you're not very confident, I also hope that you'll come out at the end with at least something that makes you feel a bit more confident, you know, you can go away and put into practice, or feel confident that you've already got going on in your emails. So thank you everybody for taking a moment to do that. I'll crack on, I'll get into it. So, oh, if it lets me, there we go. So just very briefly, sort of in terms of thinking about emails and the copywriting for emails and why they're quite different to web pages. You really need to think about capturing people's attention in the first place. You can't just keep it in the same way that you would with like the web traffic once they get to your website. So you're going to have greater competition for people's attention within somebody's email inbox. They're going to be enticing discount shopping offers. You're going to have bill reminders that they're going to feel are quite urgent to click on. And that's before you get to all of the other charity emails who are probably asking for similar things to you. So there's going to be that greater competition that you've got to consider there. And also thinking about the context of someone receiving that email. Often people are checking emails or checking their phones in real stolen moments. They might be just waiting between, you know, getting the next bus or sitting at the bus stop. Often we find that people who are on social media or on their phones are sat on the toilet. So that's more common than you think. So these stolen moments. So just thinking about that when you're trying to remember how much you need to grab the attention. Mobile phones account for often over like 50% of the traffic. So do keep that in mind when you're optimizing your emails as well, that they are optimized for mobile as well as looking at it on a traditional desktop. So something we always say that your emails need to be are, especially compared to like we say those web pages, is shorter. Usually there are exceptions, but most of the time keep them short and sweet. Nice and focused on what you're talking about, and making the purpose really clear for the recipient. We'll go into this in more detail, but these are kind of your top level. Try and bear this in mind. Keep them short, focused, to the point, really clear what they're about. Always think about why you're sending this email. Be clear about what your purpose is. And if you don't have a clear purpose, don't write the email. We see this all the time. Don't send an email because you have a schedule, an internal schedule. And this is something we tend to go into in a lot more detail in like the full training, but essentially it's about sort of changing the way that you're thinking about, instead of it being an internal led reason for why you're doing things, think about it being a supporter led reason. Why do the supporters want this? What do they get out of it? So think about your supporter needs as opposed to your internal wants. We see it all the time where people have, like, for example, a monthly newsletter, and maybe one month it's absolutely crammed with everything you need to get out that month, and other times it feels a bit dead because you've not got a lot to say. So while newsletters can be really useful and they definitely can have their purpose, it can be really easy to fall into a trap with newsletters of being this internal need sort of fulfilling as opposed to supporter needs. Also, don't start with the tactic, because basically the email here is the tactic of talking to them. Start with the strategy and what it is that you want to communicate, and then go from there. Oh, sorry. Yeah. When it comes to sort of like contact, and again, I'm saying email brief here, but contacting supporters, you're thinking about talking to them, always write yourself an email brief first and think about some of these three key things. What is the objective of the email? We say that email should always have one objective. So we've seen this time and time again. We've done loads of testing with loads of different charities of different sizes, and that in like 90% of cases, this always works, where you stick to sort of want clear objective for what you want out of that email. What is it that you want it to achieve, people to feel, or people to do? Newsletters, while they can have their purpose, they are often lent on way too heavily all across the sector and by individual charities and organisations. And again, they really reflect the schedules that you have internally and that internal politics of we want to get these things out, rather than that audience need. So thinking more about what you have to say and when, and what you want the supporters to hear, as opposed to, oh, we need to get that email out this month. Again, audience needs. This is more of a strategic thing to think about, which we would normally cover more in our training, but we don't have so much time for today. But if you have these kind of things, thinking about any kind of segments you've already got and any insights, do you know if your audience who are receiving this email or this content, what campaigns, or have they all, I appreciate this is fundraising, but you might think about what campaigns they've already done, because that can be very well connected to your fundraising asks. If you know what campaigns or actions they've already taken, what donations have they already made, what was the donation for, was it a specific theme, a specific topic that interested them? Do you know anything about, from your segmentation, about who they are and what motivates them? Again, don't fall down too much of a rabbit hole sometimes in terms of segments and insights, but if you have these and you're using them well, it can be really helpful to think about that. And also think about what success looks like for this email, like as opposed to, again, just thinking, oh, we need to get this email out. What determines whether or not this is a successful email for you? What would the outcome be? What would that look like? What would people have done or be feeling or understand better to make this a successful email? So context is really important that you don't forget context. Start with it, actually. Before you send any email or any communication of any kind of donation ask yourself, what was the last email or content that that person received? What emails have they been receiving in general lately? How many times have you already sent them a fundraising ask this month or the last couple of months? Or on the flip side, when was the last time you sent them one at all? And really have a real picture of these things in your mind. How many times have you sent them a loyalty email lately? And by loyalty email, in this context, what I mean is an email showing the value of their support, whether it's in terms of breakthroughs you've made with your work or demonstrating the value of the donations that people have previously made, and basically really using that to build the relationship with you and your supporter. When was the last time you sent somebody one of those? And a great way to keep track of this is to map out your emails. So this is an example here. We kind of use often different colors to talk about kind of 4 different things, which would be pink might be a campaign, yellow might be a engagement ask, which is where you're getting people to do things, but it's not necessarily a campaign ask. Red would be a donation ask, and blue would be loyalty, which again, I was just talking about kind of building that relationship, feeding back the value of what they're doing as a supporter. So it can be really easy to map it out this way. It doesn't have to have a huge amount of detail in it. It's just so you can look at a quick glance and see, oh, if you have loads of red all together, you can say, oh, we've already sent them quite a lot of donation asks recently. We probably don't want to do it again. But it's really easy to forget as well, or think you haven't or you have, and when you can look back and see. So we find these very helpful. We talked just then about giving context and maybe personalizing it. Even if you're talking about a completely brand new topic or asking for money on something you've never spoken to them about before, you can still personalize it, even when you're transitioning. This is a nice example here from Age UK. You've been so helpful with our campaign to say free TV licenses that we want to speak to you about another issue that's close to our heart. Care system, and then they go on to talk about the issues with the care system. This is a complete kind of, apart from the context of Age UK, these are completely different topics, but you've used that context and that personalization, what someone's done recently to transition and talk about something new. It feels like less of a up from the blue, something really cold. So when it comes to structuring an ask email, in your case, it's probably fundraising a donation ask. Touched on this before, one email, one ask. If you're really trying to get people to take one specific action, this especially applies. If that's not the case, then it can change. But we try to say about one email, one ask, especially if there is one specific thing that you want someone to do. Get to your call to action, what the thing you want them to do, as soon as you possibly can. Usually in the first 2 sentences for kind of action-driven content, really try to get to the point as soon as possible. It's okay to repeat it further on down in your in your email or your content. We'll come onto that in a little minute about giving context a bit further down and starting off and repeating it. But try to get to the point and what you're asking for as soon as you possibly can, and then repeat it later when you've added a bit more context. Keep sentences and paragraphs as short as you possibly can. It's quite funny, this slide was originally from the training, and a colleague of mine wrote this, where she said, if you're reaching for a semicolon, you've already lost. And yet I know that she writes semicolons and commas all the time because I'll proofread the work and things. So the point of that is to say that obviously all these tips I'm giving you today, these are best practices. This isn't to say that anybody is perfect or you're going to go away and do all these things instantly, but it's good to have in the back of your mind, or when someone else to look it over for you, because you might have missed it when you're writing it and you're really in it, but they'll have it fresh when they look at it. So try to keep things punchy. I always read them out loud. If you need to take a breath, if you're just putting endless commas in, it's probably better to put a full stop and just do it as a new point. If you want to take the one email, one ask step really further, I tend to go for like one sentence, one point. So think about that as well. And make key information really pop. Use bold to really make some of the certain important bits of your text stand out. Use the buttons, your call to action buttons, wisely in terms of making them stand out and what they actually say. Be clear about what you're asking for. I'll mention that a bit more in a minute. There is obviously, of course, a fine balance with this. You don't want to go so far with using too many things that it becomes really cluttered. I use the analogy of when you're studying and you think you'll highlight the important bits, and then you end up with one big block page of just yellow highlighter, you know, so trying to find that balance in there between the two. Also using the PS, using the postscript for new angles or information. As long as you're making it, you know, it's new angles and it's worthwhile, and you're not just trying to use it to cram in information that you otherwise wouldn't put in the email. But I know for a fact, emails that I receive, if I know that there tend to be some good juicy bits in the PS, I will deliberately scroll all the way to the bottom to check that, so they can be used well. And I'll show you some examples of that being used well in a second. And that's what we're going to look at now. We're going to look at the examples of some of the things I've just mentioned. So this is a email from Liberty. I'll just give you a quick second to just look over it. But this email has one clear ask. They want you to email your MP, asking them to reject the Rwanda bill. That's very clearly what they want you to do. They're not getting other things muddled in there. I appreciate some of these won't all be fundraising examples, just so I can show you a variety, but obviously these would apply to you in your work as well. So the sentences and paragraphs are short, they're to the point, they're very clear. They've used bold throughout. They've used bold, but not overly. So, you know, it's clear that it's talking about the Rwanda bill. It's only going to take you a few minutes, and making their stance very clear. And the use of the call to action buttons are very clear. They want you to email your MP, not vague, and they're already saying it's just going to take 3 minutes. They're being quite transparent with the reader. This isn't a one button click, but it also won't take too long. So this one's from Greenpeace. Again, one very clear financial ask. So this is a financial ask example. And again, they've bolded up the key information. They're talking about previous victories that they've already secured, again, giving that context, bringing it back, and now talking about how you can use your donation to help secure these victories in the future. This one is from Oxfam. So a couple of things on here. The visuals at the top are really attention grabbing. You know, the next 48 seconds are crucial. Please act now. One thing to bear in mind is that these could be hidden if they're not loaded. So if you use text within an image, it's really important that the text of an email or your content overall is not reliant on that text within that image, because it could mess up your whole email if it's not loaded properly for somebody's email. So they can be really great, but don't make the whole content reliant on it. It's got a really clear ask. They want you to share the video. They get to the point straight away in the first couple of lines. It starts with the asks, and then it goes on to give more context. There are some people who will not want to do your ask straight away. They might need a bit more information, either because they're new to the topic or they just want to understand it a bit more before they go on to do something. So it's often really good to ask first and then go into the great more context, and then repeat your ask again further down, because someone might have, you know, feel more comfortable once they've had that added context. And again, this is a kind of campaign share ask, but the same thing applies for fundraising and donation asks. We would usually avoid kind of too many links to other pages, because again, it's too many distractions and you're taking them away from the clear ask or objective that you want them to achieve here. But in this case, these links are all related to this ask. It's giving them more context about the video, website for more information around the video. So in this case, it makes sense. And then you might see at the bottom that they use the PS, and so reassuring people that if they're not on social media, they can still take part in this. They can still email their friends. We actually often find email is very common in terms of shares, which brings me to my next point around the use of PS. So we've got a few examples here of some good use of it. This one from Versus Arthritis at the top talks about giving time to give to Christmas appeal. It can be a fine balance between not shoehorning in a financial ask at the end of too many things, again, drawing people away from potential attention, but you can make a decision around what works for you. I really like the one at the bottom where it's very useful practical advice for some people. For the Age UK, here is a helpline. It's not taking away from what the key ask of that email is, but it's there and it's giving a value to the supporter. So some nice examples of that, of the use of that there. So writing the persuasive copy when it comes to persuading people to donate to you or to give you your money, their money. So again, hammering home this point, but get to the point in the first sentence or as soon as you possibly can about what it is that you want them to do and why. Tell or show your supporters why they matter. And so you want to be thinking about why this, so a supporter's reading it and they're thinking, why this, why me, and why now? They should be able to understand why this topic is important, because they have got all these other things, all these other topics that all these other charities are saying, we really need your help with this. This is super crucial. Why this one in particular should they give their time and their energy to? Why them? Why are they in particular quite useful to you? Why are they so valuable to you? Make that really clear. And why now? Obviously, you always need money all times of year to keep everything going. But what's the hook as to why people are giving now? And it doesn't have to be, oh, there's been an urgent thing that's gone terribly wrong. There doesn't have to have been an urgent disaster for it to be now. It doesn't have to be that a bill's going through Parliament. You could potentially say, we know things are going to be hard. We know things are going to get worse. For example, say you're a homelessness charity, you know winter is going to be worse than it is in the summer, right? For people, your service users. You saying why now because you want to be proactive and be ready. That's why we need it now. So think about it. Think about your hook. Give them a reason that they should be not just going, oh well, you know, you can do it. I can do it later. And make it as personal as you possibly can. Obviously, don't do it disingenuously, but the more insights you have into what these people have done in the past, whether they've made donations and what they were for, make it as personal as you possibly can, at the very least, using your CRM to put their name in the email. So again, some examples of some of those is this here is a really strong opening sentence saying our Madriza is at risk of execution. That's really powerful. Clearly, we know what the issue is straight away. One thing that's not quite so good here is the poor button labeling. So it says, yes, I will help, but it is quite vague about what you want them to do. Now, this approach can be a bit different when it comes to a financial ask as opposed to a non-financial ask. Sometimes a slightly vaguer or less obviously labeled button might encourage people to read the intro copy to, you know, what you're asking or saying before they just hit delete, because if they're just not in the mindset to donate money, right, it can be helpful. But you need to be careful that you're not being too vague and disingenuous. When we talk about campaigns and action taking, we do tend to say, try and be as absolutely clear as possible in your button what you're saying. Again, they have said donate today right at the top, but just be mindful that might not load in someone's email. They might not see that. Yeah. Here, just a reminder, obviously mistakes can happen, but, and I've used ITN as an example here, but they do always personalize their emails, at least these days. So no shade to them, but yeah, try to be putting people's actual names in their emails that you're addressing them to, and just be mindful of that, you know, avoid very impersonal or data numbers, you know. So this is an email for Versus Arthritis. This is from Yvonne. Although she works with them, you know, it's a very personal email. It's not very corporate. If you just cast your eyes over the contents for a minute, it's very personable. It's very human. Something I particularly love about this email is the use of the way they use bold. Now, you don't have to do this. This isn't a hard and fast rule, but I love that you could just read the bold in this email and nothing else, and you understand what they're trying to say. You know, you're writing to say hello and welcome to the community. This is a community, it's like a safe space. You can tell it how it is, it's nice and open. You can talk about anything. Onto the second side. You know, that's why I wanted to say hello and invite you personally. And then they've got the personalization and you've got Rebecca's name in there as well. So I really love that use of bold there, because even if you read nothing else, you know that that's what the gist of this email is, and that's how they want you to feel. They want you to feel welcome, that you don't need to do anything. And this is another one from reverse arthritis, but this time it is from a supporter, someone who's supporting them. Supporter authored emails in our experience always do really well. They tend to do so much better than emails necessarily from like members of staff or just kind of anonymous from the organization. And so here we're connecting again to the context of what someone has done before. They have you know, they've clearly taken part in a petition that Rob has been part of, taking to Downing Street. And again, that might sound like a campaign action, but again, when you're asking for money, that can still be used, that still can be connected, or you could look at previous financial donations they've made. So do consider client authored email, supporter authored emails, but also client authored emails as well. First person tends to do, really well. So let's see it in action. What we're going to do now is I'm just going to show you a few examples. I want you to think back on the things I've just told you, and I'd like you to have a little look and identify some things that you think these emails have done really well, and things that I've mentioned that are not so great that you should try and avoid. I think the best thing to do is, I don't know if we can like raise hands and share, or just pop it in the chat function. But I'll give you, there's going to be 2 slides that have both got 2 emails on, so I'll give you a minute to read through each of them, and then no rush or anything, and then start sharing what you might think, and then I'll share some what they've done well and not so well. So just take a second to, can everyone read that? Okay, I hope they're big enough. I'll just give you a few more seconds just to take a look at the, do take a minute to kind of read the one on the right as well, in particular, the content of that one. Yeah, thank you, Alex. If other people want to start putting some thoughts on what emails have done well or not so well in the chat function, feel free, or I don't know if you can put your hands up in here and share. Let's have a look. Oh, sorry, let's do that. Okay, brilliant. So yes, so some of the things that you've highlighted here. So that first email got a nice use of bold. They've used it to sort of say, this is why we're emailing you. It's B-Day. That's the why now. That's why we're saying this and now. You know, what we want you to do is you can have this Bee Saver kit. And then they get to the real point with bolding up like what you actually get in the kit, so you know what the value is. They have those 2 different ask buttons in there. You know, it's slightly lower down in terms of where they're putting their donate, but then they give you more detail about what you'd actually get out of the kit before they then go on to ask you again. In terms of the author for the first one is Bees, which is a really sweet way of doing things. It's very unique and a bit different. As someone who has worked in a wildlife charity, it's really hard because you can't have kind of sort of the people that you're supporting. You can't have them being authoring things because they are, you know, creatures. So I think this is quite a sweet way of doing things. One thing to remember is I'm not 100% sure when the email came through whether or not you could see the image that says the bees. So make sure there's something there just in case the image doesn't load for some sort of reason. Someone mentioned about the PS, and I had mixed feelings on the PS for this email because they are actually asking for the exact same thing again. That, you know, it's not a different ask. Now that's not necessarily a thing that you absolutely can't do. I think what we talked about earlier was, you know, being clear or vague in terms of asking for money, and the one at the bottom is not so much of a clear donate ask, so people may have gone and clicked on it. I suppose you've got to think long term about, would people be annoyed if they clicked on it and then found like you were asking to donate? I think what's interesting about this is that you get something. I've had one of these myself. You are getting something. You're getting a product, if you like, from the return. So think that through in your own unique cases. Yeah, and the buttons are quite clear. Yeah, and so I think that's pretty much everyone has been getting all of those points and lots of good points in there. Now the email from the second one, I have some mixed feelings compared to my colleague on this one as well. So this is from an organisation called Flora and Fauna. They tend to be quite playful with their content, and they do tend to be a little bit more text heavy. One thing I will give them some grace and bear in mind is I think this was cropped so it could be fit on the slides. There may have been some slight more borders or imaging around that I'm not giving them credit for. There may have been some personalisation that we're not seeing, but as it stands, everyone's pointed out those are not in there, which would be good to do. In terms of this, to me, it looks quite text heavy. It does look quite text heavy. Now, there aren't any kind of asks or buttons breaking up, but the purpose of this is to make people feel valued and thanked. So you don't necessarily need a button. You don't want to be putting images in for the sake of it or buttons in for the sake of it. But yes, it does look quite text heavy. One thing they've done to sort of break that up is use more bold. I do think they're teetering on the edge of using too much bold potentially. And again, that's a fine balance, but they're making it clear, like, these are all the amazing things that you've helped us do. They're using context, linking back to what you've already done. Yeah, so they're kind of some of the key ones on there. I hope you have fun with the next one. So we've just got two more. I hope we're okay for time, but just two more to look at, and then we'll kind of be wrapping it up. That's all right. So same thing again. There's less text in these ones, so it won't take you as long. Have a little look at these two. Think about everything overall as well, not just the copy, but do have a full read of the copy for each of these, and then share in the text box again. Sorry, chat again. What do you think maybe is done quite well in some of these, and what's not quite so good about some of them? And again, just to say, obviously, there might be people on this call today who have either worked or work at some of these charities, and it's in no way criticism of specific charities. I've certainly sent some terrible emails probably in my time as well. It's just using these examples. Yeah, a couple of people identifying about the images in the first one. A lot of text is within them. They may not download properly, which is really important. Come on to a bit more about it in a second as well. I'll give you a minute to make sure everyone's had a look at the second one as well, and then we'll talk about that. Okay, yes. So basically, so we'll start with the first one. So on one hand, in this email, it is very visual heavy. And although the visuals are really nice, it makes the email very reliant on them, in terms of popping, and making the asks clear. And they, like I say, they may not have loaded, but even regardless of if they have loaded, the images are so prominent that they somewhat drown out the text. And even though it is, only three or four short lines of text, it makes it look more blocky. It makes it look more like a block of text and somewhat drowns it out. None of that text stands out. Might have been better to use less visuals, bold up some of that text, break it up a bit. The donate button is clear, which we appreciate. We like that it's a real clear donate now. They could be clear about the fact that you're donating for the eggs, maybe. The headline, I'm not sure that that necessarily means anything to the supporter, because you're launching your for them, they're doing this together for Easter, but eggs for kids, I don't know, something to make it a little bit clearer, a bit quicker possibly. But the top line is really clear about the objective of the email. The why this, why me, and why now within the first email is clear. This is for kids at Easter time who might not be getting something. You can really play a part in this. And now, well, because it's Easter and it's coming up, so that's nice and clear. This has come up a couple of times in the feedback when we've done this email, is that the text is a little bit confusing, because on one hand it makes it look like not everyone can have the chocolates, so then they're asking for chocolate, but then they're asking for chocolate. And I think they have got this thing about buying an Easter craft, which I think it's for the kids who can't have chocolate, but this has come up many times and it's not very clear. So if more than anything, just get someone else to read your work, because you can think it's super clear. Always get a colleague or someone to proofread it, because it can really highlight something you completely missed. I'd say that's probably the majority of the stuff of the first one. Now this second one, oh man, we have strong feelings at my workplace about this second email. So I think the key point of this is that this is not hitting that all those persuasive copy tips I talked about earlier. It's not hitting those. It is not hitting the why this, the why me, the why now. It's not supporter prioritize this action. Well, I'm not quite sure what prioritize is, but it's not thinking about the supporters' needs first. So it really shows the importance as well of having the right author for your email. So we talked a little bit about having supporters writing them, or clients sort of writing them. This is a staff email, which is fine. Lots of staff write emails, that's very common. But it does think about, well, how is that related to what you're asking people to do? So having a little look through this, the first line is, after a decade of nightclub promoting, I decided to start over. What does that have to do with anything with, I get it, there's a bit of history there. That's kind of the point of it, I suppose. But again, as you read through the content, there's a lot of, I did this, I did that, I believe this. Now, if this was an email specifically talking about the history of it's understandable, but this is really not showing that, why this, why me now. No connection to the supporter, not really showing what it is you do. There's no images or imagery in the content of what it is that they're doing or who they're helping. That's not coming through. It's very much about him. It's about this guy who started it. Yeah, as someone said in the text, very egotistical. It also shows about getting your key asks and your info in early, because he spent so long talking about the backstory, and I suppose specifically his backstory. They've not got to the point very quickly about what they want people to do. And again, the CTA button is a bit vague. See the story. Even if what you really want them to do is understand your history, that is still quite vague, and you could be more specific with it. Images can be really great to show the impact of your work or what it is you're doing, but again, this picture does not show probably what they're doing or who they're helping. It's worth saying, I know someone in the chat has said about Charity Water usually do brilliant comms. I think this is quite old. I'm not 100% sure what Charity Water's comms look like these days. So again, hope this doesn't sound like a criticism of charities in general or what they do for their communications, but this email specifically, I think we can all safely say is not it. And hopefully they probably, as someone saying they're better, they probably learned from it. So that's also a nice moment to remember that it's good to try different things, even if they sometimes flop. Don't be scared to try something new, but obviously this was not quite right. But, learn from failures, learn from mistakes, don't let them put you down. I think that was probably pretty much everything for those ones. We don't have time to go into some of these things today, so I'm just, oh God, it's gonna make me, okay, sorry about this. I don't have time for that today. But what we're going to do is just do a bit of a review, just do a couple more questions. They're not poll questions this time. They are kind of open-ended questions to give you a moment. I just want you to take a moment to sort of reflect on, you came in today and had to think about what your supporter emails and things look like at the moment. And I've shared some tips and things with you today, and you've taken a moment to see that in action and to draw that out and apply it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch some questions. Here we go. And just give you a moment to reflect on this. So here we go. So we've got a few questions here. Again, no right or wrong answers. It's more just giving you a just giving you a moment to reflect on some of these. So have a read through of these poll questions. I say poll questions, but read through these questions, share some of your answers in there, have a think about what how that applies to you today. I've just seen someone put in the chat about the subject line section. I think we've got some time at the end, so depending on that, and Alex, we may or may not have time to address that at the end, and if not, I can catch up with you later about it as well. So if you just take a minute looking at these questions. So we've got, what's one new thing you learned today? Hopefully there's something new in there. Oh, can people not see the questions? Okay, someone has said they
I can see them.
Okay. Samantha, I'm sorry that you can't see them. If anyone else can't see them, pop them in the chat. I'll read them out. So just having a think about something new that you might have learned today, or top tips from today that you're quite confident that you're actually already doing, because I think it's always nice to take a moment to recognize that you instead of beating yourself up about what you're not doing, recognize what you're already doing well, and then think about some things that might have surprised you, if there was anything that surprised you today. And lastly, any kind of key things. I think it's always nice when you've been to something like this to think of one key thing that you're going to take away from today and put into practice, whether that's something that you think you can put into practice quite quickly, and you can do straight away. You're like, you know what, we can get this going, or it's something you think, you know what, this might take a little bit of convincing, this might take a bit more time and strategy getting people on board, but I would really like to work towards it in the future. There are the questions for anyone who can't see them to just have a bit of a reflect on. I'm glad most people can see them. It's nice to see the answers coming in as well. I'm conscious of time, so I can always leave this running in the background as well. But I don't want to go on for too long. So I just want to say a really big thank you for listening today. Thank you for coming along. It's nice to know that so many people came along. I hope this was helpful, whether it just reassured you in terms of things that you are doing correctly. Hopefully everybody got something a bit new out of it that they want to do or try or do differently in the future. This is my email address if you want to write it down. Also, if you just Google Maureen, if you're not sure and you can't find it, you can contact us through there. As I say, we do a full copywriting training that is 4 hours over 2 days. We've got a public facing one that anybody can come along to. It's in the autumn, I think it's September, or we can do these copywriting trainings that's sort of in-house for people. We do various other trainings as well. We don't just do this one. We do supported journeys, we do supported recruitment, we do loads of them off the top of my head, but we also do various other things, and we work on consultancy as well. I won't go into all that detail now, but if you want to find out more about it, it's on our website, or you can email me specifically and ask. I hope this has been really helpful. I hope you've got a lot out of it. I know a lot of you said at the beginning you were already feeling fairly confident, so I hope that this either reassured you or reaffirmed what you already knew, or got some new things out of it as well. So thank you so much. I will pass back to Alex because I'm conscious of time and I've run over a little bit.
Thank you. Thanks, Charlotte. That was yeah, really kind of inspiring, and definitely had some tips for practical ways to take this away and start looking at how I can rewrite some of my actions and emails out to donors. So I'm just having a look through the questions. If you do have any questions, please put your hand up, or you can add these to the chat. I have one from Rosie from the Grand Appeal, and that I'll just read out. So do you have any advice for managing office politics with several teams, so events, community, etc., wanting sections on the monthly e-news and how to make it more streamlined and concise, as it can end up with a lot of calls to action? And I was going to ask something similar as well with things like newsletters. What would be your advice around that in terms of it having lots of different subject matters?
Yes, so I appreciate that this is probably one of the hardest things, especially when you've got lots of teams and and when I first started this job and my colleagues were saying about this to me, and I was like, how do you even go about that? You're like one person, you're not going to change how it all works strategically. First of all, find the people who are kind of on your side and agree with you about this, whether that's your managers or the people in your team. Try and find people who are on board with this, and then look at those people in other teams, because often there are sometimes people in your organization who do want to make these changes or are open to these changes, even if there are other people who aren't. We use the magic phrase of a pilot project sometimes, or a sort of test run, in terms of, don't worry, we're not going to be bombarding your special audience or your audience that you're worried about with new asks. We're not going to make this a huge overhaul. We're going to do a little test. We're going to do a pilot thing where we try this for a month. We try this for a series of emails. We try it with a certain audience or a certain topic, and just do it as a little test run. And so find your kind of allies, get people on your side internally who you can, have those conversations, keep it going, and try and run a little test project, a little pilot thing. I think that if what you've currently got is like a really full bumper newsletter, maybe try breaking it down, maybe try the newsletter a bit more often. Something I personally love is I connect so much more with the charities or the organizations who email me more regularly, at least once a week, than the people who email me once a month, because it's that relationship. I know they're going to be in my inbox, and I know they're going to have something worth telling me. I appreciate that what comes behind that is a huge mentality shift for your entire organization, and you alone probably cannot. I'm definitely not sat here saying that you can change that individually, but there are little bits. So I'd start with a test project. I would start finding your allies, trying little bits bit by bit, and just seeing how it goes. I hope that's helpful. But again, we can talk about these things more. We've done this with organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know about other organizations, but I was thinking that it might be worth making sure that you speak to other services as well, to make sure that that individual might not be receiving emails from, say, volunteers or from one of the services. So just to make sure that they're not kind of bombarded, so it's quite smooth for them.
Yeah, something we talk about a lot in our trainings or other things is tech, and it's often the thing that you don't think about, or you feel like you don't know about, or some teams might gatekeep a lot in terms of who. But the more you know about who's receiving what and who's getting things, the much clearer that you can be when you start working collaboratively with other teams about people, what they're receiving, because you can then help break down that fear of, oh well, you can't send that to this people because they've already received that. And the more you actually know and understand how that job works internally, and you can see what they're getting, the more you can have some proper productive conversations about that. So start talking to your tech teams and people who manage all that if you're not already data teams.
Yeah, absolutely. So Wiggs has a question which is very similar to Caroline's ask earlier. So Caroline asked about a brief kind of overview on subject lines, and Wiggs from Global Goals Centre has also asked what the top tips on using email subject headers are. So I guess slightly similar there.
Tell you what I'll do. If I've got 2 minutes, let me just go back to the main slide on that, because originally I was going to do this, and then I wanted to add in the elements that we could do interactively, and then it all just got too long, and I was very worried about going over. But basically, this is email design, so we won't worry about that. how many times did I tell you today about important images? This kind of comes into it. So yeah, always try and send it from someone. People will start to recognize the name. It's not the subject line, but it's the person who it comes from in your inbox. People will start to recognize. I know, for example, that Jade is the person who sends it from Surfers Against Sewage, and you start to recognize those names. So that can be nice. Always make it name it. Don't just say it's from your organization if you can. Don't forget that sender name and the preview text as well. Make sure you make the most of that preview text. You might find out what's the best time to send it in terms of your organization, but only you will know that. There is no universal best time to send an email. Don't worry too much about making mistakes in the emails or the subject lines, because oops, emails get more open rates because people want to see what went wrong if they didn't notice it already. In terms of those subject lines, so yeah, this is where you can see about the sender name, for example, the Together Trust, it all comes through as a block, whereas in the right hand side you've got all this nice mix of names. Subject line. So this is a good one. Try and make it personal. So it says here about like parking in your local area. Claire is my colleague who has received this. You know, Claire versus Goliath. They've really personalized it and made it a really active kind of subject line. Again, the bottom one, your name is missing. You know, it's personalized. The top one, the cost of living in SE8, that would have been the person's personalized postcode. So there are various ways to personalize this. How will Ian Stewart vote? I think he was a candidate or something like that. So again, it's personalised and local. Oh, where's that gone? I've got so many tabs open. Time sensitive. Oh, you've got to get this right, because I love the time sensitive stuff, and it definitely, I play right into it. When something seems really urgent, people are much more likely to take action. That is unfortunately how also like scamming attacks and things happen, and people give away money that they shouldn't be doing. So don't make your subject line like kind of scammy or disingenuous in terms of a sense of urgency, but do think about how you can use time sensitivity. You know, 13 days to save the bees, is that because there's a specific vote happening in 13 days? You know, make that really clear. You know, make it time sensitive. One thing I would say is think about what urgent means to you and your organization. Otherwise you look a bit boy who cried wolf. I know I've got some organizations in my inbox where, you know, they're often dealing with like humanitarian crises, and those are really urgent, but you have to be careful that then you're not also saying, for example, this week has been that big give, and lots of people have been saying about that being urgent are really important, and you've got to really think for your organization, what does urgent mean? Because otherwise you end up as a supporter with an email full of urgent emails, sorry, an inbox full of urgent emails from a specific organization, and actually you start to distrust them about what urgent means in that context. So do be time sensitive, but think about what that means to you so you don't become disingenuous about it. Questions are really nice as well. Get people engaged, get them thinking, makes you want to click on the email, find out a bit more. Action focused. Now, again, I appreciate you guys, this is fundraising, and some of these action focused ones are often quite like campaigning or engagement focused. However, I think it's really important that I'm sure a lot of you know this already, you don't think as your supporters as fundraisers. I don't sit here and think of myself as a campaigner or a fundraiser or a specific thing. So all of your audience should be receiving a nice mix of some campaign actions, some engagement actions, which are things they can do that make a difference or get them involved that aren't necessarily campaigning, loyalty to hear about what's made a difference, and of course those donation asks, because I might want to give money when I've got it at some point. So your subject line, if you can make it action focused, that's fantastic. And again, it's okay if you're then going to be asking for money at a later point. It's all bit part of that bigger narrative, that context that we talked about early on, that colourful box map. So, you know, yeah, this is quite campaign heavy, but hopefully you'll be having a nice mix of things, of engagement actions at the very least, among what your supporters are receiving. Get that curiosity going. So me, my poop and the rainforest, that email that you looked at earlier on, one of those slides that look quite text heavy, that's flora and fauna. That's why I'm sort of talking about that, you know. I'm not sure how I feel about the bottom one, but you know, it depends as well what kind of niche your organization goes for, and grabbing people with those subject lines. And using the preview text is really important to complement it. Like, you know, the bottom one is you want people to share stuff with you, so use them. Sorry, I'm rushing through this because I don't want to stay too long on your time. But yeah, get those preview texts is just as important as the subject line itself. And also think about how it will appear, because if you put something really important at the end of the preview text or the end of the subject line, it might not show up. I had this recently where I think they were trying to make it personal and they were trying to make it relevant, but because it could only see the first bit, it looked very generic. So do try and test that and check that as well. All of this to say, it sounds like I'm saying do this, do that, do 1,000 things. Just play around with it. Don't be scared. People won't unsubscribe from you or not donate to you because one email wasn't a big hitter. So always try new things, I would say. But don't be too worried about that. That was a very whistle-stop tour. I hope that answered some questions and was helpful in terms of the stuff around subject headers and subject lines. I just see a question about approaches to apply to types of fundraising, such as legacy marketing and in-mem fundraising. Yeah, I'd say this applies to everything. Just always think about context. Obviously, in-memory and legacy can be very sensitive. You will know your context and what works with your supporters better than anybody else. You have to think about that with those things. But that can often be a sensitive area as well when it comes to who's receiving what in terms of various emails internally. You know about when's the right time for people to receive more general stuff or from other people, or they've just come in through in memory. Obviously, you don't want to be asking them to take really serious actions necessarily straight away. So you know better than anyone. Try certain things, have conversations with colleagues to find those foundations of what will work for you. I'll stop talking now in case it was out of my voice. Don't know about you.
Great, thank you, Charlotte. I think those are all of the questions, and we're right on time. It's 11 o'clock. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming along. Thanks, Charlotte, massively for your presentation. Really insightful. We'll be sending out an email shortly, just asking, just sending out a survey to see how it went. If you've got any comments or queries, please let us know. Charlotte added her email there. If you're able to add it to the chat quickly, Charlotte, that'd be great. And then anyone can copy it if they need it at all to get in touch. Yeah, if there are any future presentations that you would like to hear about, so any particular topics, please let us know. We try to ensure that that we're able to cover as many topics as people ask for. But yeah, thank you, everyone. I hope you have a lovely day. And thanks for coming along.
Thank you, everyone, for having me.
Cool. Thank you, Charlotte. Cheers.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'm going to end the meeting now. Okay. Nice to see Alex and everybody. See you soon.